Alright guys, the year is rapidly going by, so we are approaching the time that all the outlets tend to talk about the game of the year. And I don't think we can fairly have this discussion if we don't look at like the top selling games for 2024. And of course, the one sitting right there at the very top is Black Myth Wukong, a game that sold over 18 million copies in just 2 weeks between PS5 and PC. And again, this game completely shattered records. It shattered Steam numbers. It has just become one of the most top played, most talked about games currently in the modern era. And for good reason. And we've seen a lot of slop come out this year, a lot of really bad woke games, a lot of these things that the woke media wants you to go and play and say, oh, look how wonderfully diverse and inclusive it is. But the reality is the games suck. So Black Myth Wukong has been pushing the sales charts, has been pushing the Steam charts, and it's actually led to an increase in not just sales, but in total people playing games on Steam. If you look at it right here, we hit 38.3 million people concurrently playing on Steam not too long ago. And a lot of that had to do with the success of Black Myth Wukong, a game that, as I speak right now, has 164,000 people playing it, a concurrent peak from the last 24 hours of almost 500,000 people, and an all-time peak of 2.4 million people worldwide. Like I said, absolutely shattered records. I think it's like the second highest peak of all time. Alright, while we're talking about Black Myth Wukong, I want to talk about the controller I've been playing this game on, the Beitong Zeus 2. Now this controller they sent out to me to test out, and I was actually blown away by how cool this thing is. I usually play on an Xbox Series X controller, but this thing was a lot of fun. It's got all these different parts you can swap out. You can swap out the thumbsticks. You can swap out the mechanical buttons here, the modular buttons. I actually like the mechanical clicky buttons like the keyboard. Like I have a mechanical keyboard, so for me that's super awesome. You can swap out the faceplate. I actually put in a different D-pad. It's this octagonal one here. The coolest part is the controller is a little bit heavier, in my opinion, than a standard like Xbox or Nintendo controller. And I like a little bit of extra weight. I even swapped out the joystick to the 6mm because I don't have huge hands. So for me, I prefer my thumbs to be a little bit closer to the controller. But yeah, this thing is just a lot of fun, very responsive. The motion controls work great. Again, for using for like games like Elden Ring and Black Myth Wukong, it has been absolutely killer. It even has buttons on the bottom of it, like 4 extra buttons on the bottom. This thing has just got incredible response time, and the coolest part is it has this software you can download from the website itself, from Beitong, and you can customize the vibration, the LED lights, all of this stuff. So huge thank you to these guys for sending this out to test. I think this thing is just freaking awesome. I've been having a blast with it. So if you're looking for a good controller for your PC or Nintendo Switch, I could not recommend this enough. And so of course, we've seen games like Concord, games like Dustborn, games like oh my god, there's so many of them that we've talked about this year that are just these complete garbage trash games that, I mean, the Concord is probably the worst given the fact that the player count just dwindled further and further until they finally pulled the plug on the game. But you get the idea. These are not games that did anything for the games industry. It didn't do anything for the Steam chart numbers. It did nothing to push the Steam numbers up. And so while we're talking about Game of the Year, these are some games that should be considered worst games ever. Not just for 2024, but like some of the worst games of all time. Speaking of Game of the Year, we have IGN with their little, head-to-head battles that you can sign up for and do. You can play the face-off. And interestingly enough, if you looked at this a day ago, Black Myth Wukong was sitting at the top, having won 90% of its duels. Currently at the top is Shadow of the Erdtree, which I think is a very good DLC. I would be remiss if I said that I think that it should be Game of the Year, given the fact that it is a DLC and not a complete game on its own. But here they have it sitting at number 1, with 73.6% of its duels won. Next, we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with 72.3% won, and at third, Black Myth Wukong with 68.2% of its duels won. Now here's where things get kind of fishy, okay? Grumps put out here, oh, yo, IGN, are you cheating? IGN appears to manipulate user votes for the Game of the Year to erase Black Myth Wukong's substantial lead. Look at the timestamps and vote counts. Wukong drops from 90% to 74% in the span of an hour. They did this at 5 a.m. when most are asleep. But look at Final Fantasy in the number 2 spot. It doesn't gain much at all, same with Helldivers. So you see right here where it started off at 90.4% with 181,569 duels. Then with only 194,293, so it added 13,000 duels, it drops 5 percentage points. I mean, there are things that could explain that, but what happens is over time it progresses further and further to where it just continues to drop, and yet none of the rest of these games see any significant increase in their duel numbers. So it's very strange, very weird how this worked out, okay? Seemed a little fishy. Now, of course, there are people that said, in fact, Wukong lost a large number of duels within 1 hour. However, the number of victories in other games didn't increase significantly. And of course, there's charts you can look through, but I'm not going to go through all of these. There are some better ways to explain it. For example, this chart right here, this guy says, while this looks like a limited data set, a 17% reduction in success rate across 4 hours is way too dramatic to be normal when it remains constant for the other games. Bots, raid, or back-end manipulation would be my guess. Just an observation, don't know how they calculated for duel success either. And again, you see the chart here, but the important thing to note is the progressive reduction in percentage of duels won by over 17.5% by Black Myth Wukong over 4 hours. Then you have the percent, however, remains consistent or even incremental for all the other games. So if Black Myth Wukong suddenly started losing all those duels against other games, why didn't the other top contenders go up? You see what I'm saying? So sure, there's the possibility that there was a chunk of people that played or that did the head-to-head duels and picked a game, a random game over Black Myth Wukong. But for example, when I looked at the duels, when I did it, Black Myth Wukong went right up against... It wasn't Space Marine 2. They had Stellar Blade against Space Marine 2. Black Myth Wukong, I think, was against No Rest for the Wicked or something. So it's very strange that so many people all of a sudden would say, oh no, I like this other random game better than Black Myth Wukong. It seems kind of fishy. And Rev Says Desu here has a little bit more information on it. I'm just going to hit play for this real quick right now.
And you can see some very disturbing things here. You can see that the percent that Black Myth Wukong was getting dropped by about 16% in 1 hour at 5 in the morning. And this is IGN, right? They have a very big audience in North America. So 5 a.m., not a lot of people are voting on a poll. And you can see throughout this hour, Black Myth Wukong went from a 90% rating to 85% to 84% to 74%.
Right, that's something important worth noting. Why in God's name would anybody get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and all of a sudden mass, go on IGN's website and do this duel at 5 a.m.? It makes no sense.
They dropped 16% in 1 hour. Compare that to the other people or the other games in this poll, like Final Fantasy, where they remained at 71.5%, went down to 71.4%, then remained at 71.4%, and then concluded at 71.3%. They dropped 0.2% over that hour, but Black Myth Wukong dropped by 16%. And this is what it initially looked like before all the shenanigans. So in my opinion, Black Myth Wukong won this poll, and IGN is absolutely seething about this game, and they will continue apparently for a long time in the future because their hit piece did not work.
And what he's talking about, of course, is this hit piece they released last year. Again, this is what kicked off so much of this drama around Black Myth Wukong, where they wrote this article about game science, the developers behind Black Myth Wukong, basically calling them all sexist, misogynist, toxic people who hate women, and that, again, we've covered this so many times, I don't need to go into detail. Long story short, though, I was looking through the comments on here, and there's one that I found extremely interesting, and I think this is going to sum it up perfectly when it comes to the odds of this being legitimate, of this not being rigged by IGN. Doing some simple number crunching, and this is from Nabro733 on YouTube. First image, 181,509 duels, 90.4% win rate, 164,084 wins. Last image, 225,206 duels, 74.4% win rate, 167,553 wins. So Wukong got 181,509 duels in days/weeks and have a 90.4% win rate. But in that 1 hour and 23 minutes, it got 43,697 duels with 3,469 wins, which is a 7.9% win rate. Also, in that time span, all the other contenders don't have a significant increase in duels, other picture sources not shown in video, which is absurd because top/popular games should have similar probability to show up in real duels. So if Wukong is getting that many duels, others should too. In that hour and a half, Wukong got 20% of total duels of all time with a 7.9% win rate against top non-top contender games. IGN wasn't even trying to hide the tampering, and I think that says it all right there. They have had it out for this game, so it is very likely, very plausible to believe that they would rig their own poll to try and make this game seem less popular. Because again, how embarrassing would it be for IGN to write these hit pieces about game science, about Black Myth Wukong, to put all this information out there to try to discourage people from buying this game and supporting this studio, to then have it win Game of the Year in their poll? But I'm going to leave it right there, guys. Let me know what you think about all this stuff. I think this is absolutely hilarious, and whether it wins Game of the Year or not is irrelevant. But this is just one more time that we can look at the hypocrisy of games media, of journalism, and just showcase that these people are just not to be trusted. Anyways, let me know what you think about all this, and I will catch you on the next one.